Before I begin, I'm sure the whole House will join me in paying tribute to the memory of Jo Cox, who was cruelly murdered 4 years ago today. Her sister Kim Ledbetter spoke for us all when she urged everyone to remember Jo by pulling together with compassion and kindness. I was concerned to learn that the Honourable Member for East Dunbartonshire is now in hospital, and we all send her our best wishes. Mr. Speaker, with permission, I will make a statement about the ambitions of a global Britain and the lessons of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're living through a daily demonstration of how events on the far side of the world influence not only British security and prosperity, but something as elemental as the state of our health and whether we can go to work, go shopping. This crisis offers vivid proof of the seminal importance of international engagement and exactly why our country must perform its global role. I've begun the biggest review of our foreign defence and development policy since the end of the Cold War, designed to maximise our influence and integrate all the strands of our international effort. And the overriding aim is to bring this country's strengths and expertise to bear on the world's biggest problems, seizing the opportunities of Britain's presidency of the G7 next year and the UN Climate Change Conference, the COP26, which we will host in Glasgow. The UK possesses the third biggest aid budget and diplomatic network in the world, and we owe it to our people to make best use of these assets, which scarcely any of our peers can match. The British taxpayer has a right to expect that we will achieve the maximum value for every pound that we spend. And one cardinal lesson of the pandemic is that distinctions between diplomacy and overseas development are artificial and outdated. For instance, to protect ourselves against another calamity, the UK will need to work alongside our friends to strengthen international bodies like the World Health Organization and help vulnerable countries to improve their health systems and achieve greater resilience. It makes no sense to ask whether this amounts to aid or foreign policy. They're one and the same endeavour, and they're designed to achieve the same goals, which are right in themselves and serve our national interest. On the 4th of June, I chaired a virtual summit of the Global Vaccine Alliance, which raised enough money to immunise 300 million children. I doubt whether any other occasion will save more lives and avoid more suffering or produce a better example of the good this country can do by its international engagement in the true and broad sense alongside our friends. And yet today, as anybody who has any experience in the matter will know, a dividing line between aid and foreign policy runs through our whole system, with our Department for International Development working independently from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and our aid budget parcelled out between different arms of Whitehall. DFID outspends the Foreign Office more than 4 times over, and yet no single decision maker in either department is able to unite our efforts or take a comprehensive overview. We give as much aid to Zambia as we do to Ukraine, though the latter is vital for European security. We give 10 times as much aid to Tanzania as we do to the 6 countries of the Western Balkans who are acutely vulnerable to Russian meddling. And regardless of the merits of these decisions, no single department is currently empowered to judge whether they make sense or not. No single department is empowered to judge whether they make sense or not. And so we tolerate an inherent risk of our left and right hands working independently. Faced with this crisis today and the opportunities that lie ahead, we have a responsibility to ask whether our current arrangements, dating back to 1997, still maximise British influence. Those well-intentioned decisions of 23 years ago were right for their time. They paved the way for Britain to meet the UN target of spending 0.7% of national income on aid, a goal that was achieved by the coalition government in 2013 and has been maintained, they went silent at that bit, didn't they? And has been maintained ever since, including this year, and which remains our commitment. Yet those judgments date from a relatively benign era when China's economy was still much smaller than Italy's, and the West was buoyed by victory in the Cold War. We must now strengthen our position in an intensely competitive world by making sensible changes. And so I have decided to merge DFID with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to create a new department, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. And this will unite our aid with our diplomacy and bring them together in our international effort. DFID has amassed world-class expertise, and all of its people can take pride in how they have helped to transform the lives of hundreds of millions of people across the world. To select but a few examples, they have striven to protect millions of children across the world from polio, which is now on the verge of global eradication. They have paved the way for millions of girls to attend school for the first time in countries such as Pakistan, as I've seen for myself. They've done their utmost to ease the suffering in Syria, and in Sierra Leone they were central to the defeat of an outbreak of the Ebola virus. And all of this amounts to the finest demonstration of British values, following in the great tradition of the country that ended the slave trade and resisted totalitarianism. And it's precisely that ambition, vision and expertise that will now be at the heart of a new department, taking forward the work of UK aid to reduce poverty, and that will remain central to our mission. The Foreign Secretary will be empowered to decide which countries receive or cease to receive British aid, while delivering a single UK strategy for each country, overseen by the National Security Council, which I chair. Those strategies will be implemented on the ground by the relevant ambassador, the relevant UK ambassador, who will lead all of the government's work in the host country. And in this, we are following the examples of Australia, Canada and New Zealand, all of whom run their development programmes from their foreign ministries. And we will align other British assets overseas, including our trade commissioners, who will come under the authority of the UK ambassador, bringing more coherence to our international presence. Now, amid this pandemic, this House may ask whether this is the right moment to reorganise Whitehall, but I must say that in reality this crisis has already imposed fundamental changes on the way that we operate. And if there is one further lesson, it is that a whole-of-government approach, getting maximum value for the British taxpayer, is just as important abroad as it is at home. And so this is exactly the moment when we must mobilise every one of our national assets, including our aid budget and expertise, to safeguard British interests and values overseas. And the best possible instrument for doing that will be a new department charged with using all the tools of British influence to seize the opportunities ahead. And Mr. Speaker, I therefore commend this statement to the House.
I now call the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for early sight of his statement and for the telephone call we had earlier today. As the Prime Minister has noted, today is the 4th anniversary of the tragic murder of our friend and colleague Jo Cox. And I don't need to remind the House of Jo's commitment and dedication to international aid. How highly she valued DFID as a power for good. And I'm sure the whole House will want to send best wishes to Jo's friends and family on this difficult day. Can I also join the Prime Minister in sending our heartfelt best wishes to the Honourable Member for East Dunbartonshire, to her friends, to her family and to her colleagues here and in Scotland. It must be very distressing. Mr. Speaker,